this very moment there are so many contradicting reports whether Soledar fell into hands of Russians, and today we will see the statements from both sides. And while nothing is clear yet, the inner circle of Putin already started fighting for these political points by taking the credit for Soledar. But nevertheless, in case Russians are indeed successful in this settlement, the main question remains the same: where will they go next? And today I will share with you the most probable direction for the next offensive of Russians. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video comes to us from Donetsk, where we can see Ukrainian reconnaissance drone Shark investigating the area. This drone has a 30x zoom, can fly as far as 60 kilometers away from its operator and see the targets up to 5 kilometers away. And as you can see, the picture that this drone provides is extremely of a good quality, which is basically ideal for intelligence forces. And speaking about the drones, Ukrainian company Ukроборонпром, they declared that they finished the tests for their new drone with the range of up to 1000 kilometers. This drone also can carry the cargo of 75 kilograms, and on this map we can see the territories which are potentially in the range for this new upcoming drone. And well, for comparison reasons, the Russian intelligence drone for Post-2 also got caught on camera. And as you can see from this video, which came to us from Belgorod region, the drone accidentally touched the power lines and fell. And speaking about Belgorod, during the repair works of one of Russian T-72 tanks, one ammunition accidentally detonated, destroying this tank and hurting injuring or damaging two other nearby tanks. And the main question is, was there someone smoking? Was this a sabotage? Or is it something as crazy as Russian propaganda actually telling us the right, true news? And I guess we'll never know. In several seconds I will talk about a very interesting and surprising statement that the press secretary of Russia Dmitry Peskov made recently, but first of all allow me to give just a couple more very intriguing statistics. And so the first one, as you can see right here, in just 1 year alone, Ukraine received estimated 354,000 generators. And if you combine all of them together, they produce the same equivalent of electricity as just one power unit of a nuclear power plant. And then right here is the second graph, which shows us how the trust of Ukrainians has changed over this year to different structures within Ukrainian government. And for example, the biggest trust by just regular Ukrainians is experienced by the armed forces of Ukraine, which increased all the way from 72 to 96%. And speaking about Vladimir Zelensky, the trust to the president of Ukraine has increased from 27 all the way to 84%. And yes, there are some fields also where the trust reduced, such as for example the Russian media. Last year it was around 3% and this time it's only 1%. Alright, and now as promised, let's really quick talk about this extremely interesting and controversial statement by the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov. So, what he said is that the government of Russia should create such conditions that those people who left Russia previously would want to return to their motherland. And allow me to be crazy from the perspective of the Russian government and give my own suggestion. How about you stop this invasion and war in Ukraine? Because a lot of people left exactly because of this reason. But, well, most likely my proposal will not be accepted. That is why some other Russian government authorities decided to come up with their own. Such as, for example, the chairman of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, who said that the property of those people who left Russia should be confiscated in favor of Russia and this special military operation. This does not sound like a very attractive proposal to make people of Russia come back home, right? The second proposal came to us from the chairman of Investigative Committee of Russia, Alexander Bastrykin, who said that those people who do get the citizenship of Russia should also be eligible and should be enrolled into military service. And pretty much yes, with this war going on, this will not bring a lot of immigration to Russia. And in addition to that, according to the defense intelligence of Ukraine, Russia is looking forward to increase the size of its army all the way up to 2 million people. According to them, in the near future there will be another wave of mobilization, which is in combination with the previous partial mobilization, should give Russia approximately 500,000 soldiers, which might be required by Russia in case they decide to expand their success in the east, but we'll talk about this in more details very soon. And ultimately, according to the representative of the United Russia, Anton Demidov, the majority of young men of Russia, they want to be mobilized. They say it's the majority, but I've been speaking with a lot of my male friends back in Russia, and for some reason not a single one of them wants to go to this war. They have either left the country or they're being extremely careful not to meet in person Russian military representatives. So for this reason, this statement by Anton Demidov is kinda questionable. It's either they are lying that everyone wants to be mobilized, or it's like 50 of my male friends who do not tell me something. And so yes, speaking about another partial mobilization, it is still pretty uncertain whether this will happen or not. But in case it does happen, I think we can pretty much certainly expect another offensive by Russia in the near future. And if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, so I know that a lot of you are waiting for this update from Soledar, but allow me first of all give me a very quick update from the south, where first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continue to build their defense structures on the left side of Dnipro river. According to the Ukrainian intelligence, the majority of these trenches, as well as shipping containers that Russia uses as, I guess, barricades, is located around Radiansk. And as you can see, it is located relatively far from Dnipro river itself, to be precise, approximately 25 kilometers away, which kinda basically means that Russians are no longer ready to defend the river bank itself. At the same time, some pretty loud noises have been reported in Berdyansk, where allegedly the car of one of Russian collaborators have been set on fire. As we go a little bit to the north, Russians continue their routine artillery strikes against Hulyai Pole. And right here we can see the changes in territorial control in this area, and as you can see, Russians took some part of this territory, but the next day Ukrainians decontested a small part of it. And speaking about Kherson city itself, according to Russian collaborator Vladimir Saldo, he said that people can return to this city already most likely this year, but he did not specify which people, because they might very well be Ukrainians. But okay, and now as promised, let's talk about the situation in the east, where according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, the main focus of Ukrainians was along Svatove-Kreminna road, while Russians primarily attacked obviously around Bakhmut and Soledar. Russians also reportedly tried to advance to the south of Bakhmut by capturing Klishchinivka, but Ukrainians were able to successfully repel this attack. And as you can see from this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control, this is how Russians were advancing in this area over the last several days. And pretty much yes, the situation around Soledar is extremely difficult, with both sides making directly contradicting statements. So for this reason, I'll report to you both sides of the same story so that you can decide what do you want to believe in. So yes, first of all, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, they were able to fully capture Soledar, which will allow them to disrupt the logistics of Ukrainians into Bakhmut for the subsequent capture of this city as well. First of all, the ministry made a statement that this was possible thanks to constant artillery strikes and professional actions of Russian paratroopers. But later on, the ministry also mentioned that yes, partially this success was thanks to Wagner soldiers. And obviously the leader of Wagner, Evgeny Prigozhin, did not like this statement at all. That is why the confrontations inside Putin's inner circle, they only intensified. But more about all of this very soon. We then even have some other reports by Western media, such as for example CNN journalists who were stationed approximately 4 kilometers away from Soledar, who mentioned that they were able to see with their own eyes how Ukrainians were retreating. And then according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War itself, yes, Russians most likely established the control over Soledar, or at least a big part of it, but this small victory will not give them any significant advantage. The report also responds to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, saying that after Soledar, Russians will go to Bakhmut, but most likely this will not happen because Russians are critically exhausted and they will simply not be able to march into another offensive assault into another city. And now let's talk about the statements from the Ukrainian side, which says that the battle in Soledar still goes on. According to them, there are still some Ukrainian units inside this city protecting it, and they constantly shell exposed Russian units. And one of the first official statements from Ukrainian side we have from Sergei Cherevatый, who is the representative of the Eastern Army of Ukraine, and he said that Soledar is still not yet fully controlled by Russians. We even have a video like this from a Ukrainian group Madyar, who is currently fighting in Soledar, and they say that yes, they're still inside the city, repelling the attacks of Russians. And by the way, I do have several fresh videos about the combat activities inside Soledar and Bakhmut, as well as the drone footage, but YouTube will not allow them to use here due to ongoing demonetization. For this reason I uploaded some of them to my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to financially support the channel during these times, as well as see these uncensored photos and videos, the links will be down below. Alright, back to the Ukrainian position about what is happening inside Soledar. And according to the advisor to the President of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, the battle still goes on, and Russians lost approximately 20,000 soldiers combined in Bakhmut and Soledar since the beginning of this offensive against these two small cities. And speaking about Bakhmut, we even have some sources close to Wagner itself, which say that the city of Bakhmut has not yet fully under control of Russians. Despite the claims by the Ministry of Defense of Russia, the Wagner soldiers themselves are saying that they are not even close yet to be encircling Bakhmut. Which is pretty much yes, the situation around these two cities might be extremely critical, but it is not yet fatal for Ukraine. And so yes, assuming Russians will succeed in Soledar, the main question is, where do you think they will go next? Couple of days ago, the main assumptions were that Russians after Soledar will go obviously to Bakhmut and maybe even to Seversk. And the ultimate goal of the Russian forces in the east will be to disrupt the logistics of Ukrainians in this area and then to go to Slavyansk and to Kramatorsk. But taking Soledar and Bakhmut is just the first step. And I mean, Bakhmut even still is under the control of Ukrainians. It took Russians several months and tens of thousands of lives to have this relative success in Soledar alone. So the question here is, how long do you think it will take them to fulfill this entire objective? And do you think it is even possible? So instead, Russia might want to try to stall the war in the east, just like they already did in Bakhmut, and instead open another front line, most likely in the south, in the regions such as Zaporozhye, where, to be honest, there hasn't been much activity recently, which allowed both countries to regroup and to assemble the forces. This assumption has also been confirmed by the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, who also thinks that in case there is another offensive by Russians, most likely it will happen in the south, maybe in the Zaporozhye region, and definitely not from the north of the border from Belarus. Because according to him, Russians might have some strength left to at least continue the offensive, which they already started in the south, but definitely, most certainly, they are not able to open another brand new front line. And one indirect confirmation that yes, Russians might resume the offensive in the south is, paradoxically enough, the activity in the north. And what I'm talking about here is this redeployment of Russian forces as well as military vehicles and equipment to the north of Ukraine, to Belarus, about which we'll be talking about in the last couple of weeks. And even though Russia most likely will not invade from Belarus, once again they simply don't have the power and time to do this, they will do everything possible to make it look like they will invade. Because it looks like that the whole goal of these Russian forces in Belarus is to distract Ukrainians, create this illusion, and make Ukrainian forces separate their army. And obviously, Ukraine cannot ignore such even potential threat. That is why, according to the Ukrainian ambassador in the UK, Vadim Patayko, Ukrainians, they did redeploy some of their forces closer to the north. So after all, in case this is true, Russia looks like was also potentially relatively successful in this objective as well. And ultimately, according to once again Alexei Reznikov, in case there is offensive, most likely both Russia and Ukraine will resume combat activities in the spring of this year. But you know what? Deep inside Putin's inner circle, another, even more potentially disastrous problem for Russia is brewing as we speak. And what I'm talking about here is this fight for being able to take the credit for this relative success in Soledar among Russian officials, especially the ones closest to Putin. Because many of them, they want to receive these extra political points and be simply praised for this long-awaited potential success in this settlement. And amongst the most active competitors, as we already spoke before that, is obviously the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin. His original statement goes as following, is that other people, they want to steal this victory from Wagner. He does not give us specific names who is trying to do this, but most likely it is in one way or another is related to Putin, who is most likely feels threatened by Prigozhin and he decides to fight back to keep his power. This attempt by Putin to reduce the power and influence of Prigozhin, in fact, started a couple of days ago, when the Ministry of Defense of Russia removed Surovikin, who is the favorite of Prigozhin and Siloviki faction, from his position. So right now, people who occupy the highest seats in the Ministry of Defense of Russia are the ones closer and more loyal to Putin. We even have this claim by the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, which says that they were able to find this new document which says how propagandists should talk about this war in Ukraine moving forward. And among the new requirements are the following. First one, all the information should rely on the official statements presented by the Ministry of Defense of Russia. Second is that Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov should be tried to praised no matter what. The third is that in case there are attacks against the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, the propagandists must make it look like as this was absolutely important. The fourth is that the Russian media should focus on Western countries delivering weapons to Ukraine, so that the narrative should be is not that Russia is fighting against Ukraine alone, is that Russia is fighting against the entire NATO. And the last two requirements are especially interesting. The fifth one is that propagandists should do cherry picking and find the articles from the Western media supporting the actions of Russia and try to present them as the whole opinion of the entire West. And finally, the requirement number 6 is that there should not be too many positive things about private military company Wagner, but instead they should focus on their reckless tactics and massive casualties, which is once again the attempt of the higher leadership of Russia to distance Yevgeny Prigozhin from assuming the power from Putin. So pretty much yes, after this maybe potential relative success in Bakhmut and Soledar, Russians might want to try to keep their offensive, which might in fact play a fatal mistake on them. They will set unreasonable and unattainable goals and will keep losing thousands of people trying to achieve them. Their focus will be dispersed everywhere and they will try to achieve as much as possible and try to catch up just to please the higher commandment and Putin himself. And speaking about some Russian government representatives, they already fight for this right to claim this victory and Soledar and steal it from Wagner, according to, once again, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Everyone just wants these extra political points, and they stopped thinking about the common goal. Instead, they think about their own well-being. And this will most certainly not help Russia in achieving whatever goals it has against Ukraine. And I'm not saying this is something bad. In fact, this is pretty perfect for Ukraine, because this Russian authority approach and mindset will only increase the chances of Ukraine in winning in this war. In Ukraine, victory is a victory, everyone celebrates it. But in Russia, as soon as there's even a small victory in several months, the people in the highest positions, they start to fight for this right to claim this as their own achievement. And so right now, I want you to tell me, which country is fighting for the right cause? And as always, in one way or another, good always beats evil, and I cannot wait for this to happen, and I will always be here to report on these events. And if you don't want to miss them as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to still ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you receive early access to the uncensored footage. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you on Monday.